The film opens with a scene of a deep depression in the ground. Then we see images of explosions. It appears to be a mining site, and everyone seems busy with manual labor. Among the group of people, we find a man named Shutman, accompanied by his son. Both are covered in dust and dirt, wearing clothes that suggest they work in this place. The son discusses a co-worker who recently had a job-related accident. He asks his father to have some compassion, as the kid is good. Shutman appears to be the supervisor and is apologetic when he responds that he will have to fire the kid. Even if the boy has personal problems, they shouldn't interfere with his work. The son appears sad and pleads with Shutman to give the kid a second chance, as he knows the boy is good. The father sighs and tells his son that they will discuss it later, then walks away. The boy turns and, while walking, a strange creature pushes him aside, just behind the container. He runs to his son, only to find him hanging over a dark hole, about to fall. He grabs the boy's hand and tries to pull him up, but a strange entity attacks him, pushing him aside. He stands up to help again, but realizes his son is gone. After hitting his head, Shutman seems to see his son's bloodied and bruised face struggling to stay alive. But something sinister drags the poor boy into the depths of darkness. Fast forward a year later, we meet a girl named Ariane, who collects information about Shum Hills from various articles. She is tirelessly analyzing the maps and marking the surrounding areas of the hills with a serious expression. It seems that, although Ariane has a passion for adventure, this is more personal than it seems. Suddenly, she receives a voicemail from someone named Darren. The man greets her in the message and says that he and the group are packing and bringing only essential equipment. After saying they will meet her tomorrow, the voicemail ends. It turns out there is a group of 4 people planning a journey to Shum Hills, one of them being Darren along with his friends. As the call ends, Ariane takes some photos and marks them with names and information, starting with Darren. It becomes clear that she has done a background check on these people and is carefully keeping track of whom she will travel with to Shum Hills. Our protagonist reveals herself to be a very careful and shrewd woman. She takes another photo and looks at it nostalgically. The photo appears to be an image of her childhood with her father. The next day, Ariane heads to Shum Hills with the team. The group includes a scientist named Darren and his crew, including Sean, Terry, and James. They ask Ariane how many people have tried to find Shum Hills before them, but the woman, professionally, cuts their curiosity short, saying she doesn't discuss private matters of her clients with others. In reality, Shum Hills vanished from maps after 1970, and no one knows what happened to the population there. The other team members comment. Terry, being particularly enthusiastic, keeps complaining about how there are no maps documenting that place, and that the road they are currently on doesn't even have a name. He continues saying they are going to nowhere. James and Terry start a light debate, with James accusing his friend of acting questionable, suggesting he is doubting Ariane's professionalism. Trying to justify himself, Terry says he just wants to help, and, as if to prove it, asks Ariane if there is anything he can do to assist her. The woman sarcastically silences him, retorting that maybe he could simply keep quiet. As they move along, Ariane makes a quick stop at a store to restock supplies. She gets out of the car and asks them to stay there while she goes back. The group also gets out of the car to breathe some fresh air and stretch their stiff muscles after the long drive. Darren approaches the second seat window to ask Sean, who had seemed very quiet throughout the trip, if he is okay. The man nods, and we see him tightly holding a black stone with a cross. Ariane, on the other hand, enters the store and sees strange things in jars. The store looks dark and is lit by bulbs that give the illusion of candlelight. She buys water and some coolant for the car. Then, Ariane asks about the route to Shum Hills. She says she has been following the river, but it seems there is no sign of the place they are going. As soon as the store owner hears the name Shum Hills, he stops. The other person accompanying the store owner also looks a bit suspicious. For a moment, the man pretends ignorance and shakes his head, saying he has never heard of the place. However, when Ariane insists, the man advises her to turn back the way she came and that she would be fine. His tone carries a hint of warning, as if the place Ariane wishes to reach is not safe for her. Ariane leaves the store after hearing the owner, but little does she know that the owner is calling someone, alerting them about trouble ahead. Ariane returns to the car and, when asked about the location, lies, saying they are close. It becomes quite evident at this point that she is not just an ordinary guide. After all, she must have some hidden motive. As the journey resumes, Sean expresses his concern. Suddenly, he says they shouldn't be there, that they should turn back. He and Darren discuss something that, according to Sean, isn't there, probably his scientific material. Suddenly, a car starts following them as they progress. The speed of the car slows down, and Ariane begins to suspect that they are being followed. She makes a detour and eventually arrives at a spot where it becomes evident that the car is indeed following them. She speeds up the car, and everyone inside panics, telling her to slow down, but she doesn't listen, and at one point sees the car behind them slow down. She turns onto a side road and finally sees the car that was following them pass by. Ariane somehow realizes they wanted to drive them off the road. She thus concludes that the point where the car slowed down is the place they need to go back to, because it is the spot the other car wanted them to pass. They backtrack and retrace their steps. Ariane asks them to keep an eye out for any detours or openings as they investigate further, and soon they find electric fences located in the middle of the woods. They approach the fence, and Darren reaches out to open the gate, but thankfully, Ariane stops him in time and reminds him that they are electric fences. Sean remains skeptical. He expresses concern about why someone would put fences in the middle of a forest. They clearly want to keep them out, but Darren and the rest of the group ignore his concerns and continue thinking about how to get over the fence. The always prepared Ariane pulls a rope from her backpack and makes a path to cross the fence. They all follow her lead and successfully enter the property, breaking the fence. They come across the abandoned mine of Shum Hills. They walk forward, collecting samples along the way. Before nightfall, they reach a good place to stay, setting up camp by a serene lake. They engage in a discussion about Shum Hills. During this conversation, everyone shares their theories about the place and how it must have disappeared. Darren shares a theory that there might have been a sinkhole in Shum Hills, and perhaps toxic gas emanated from it, leading to the destruction of the area. It becomes evident that none of them really knows what happened in Shum Hills. However, Darren's friend is not convinced by the sinkhole explanation. He mentions a similar incident in Russia, where a huge hole in Siberia, about a kilometer deep, produced scary sounds when a microphone was thrown into it. The sounds echoed like people screaming or calling. He suggests that the United States may have decided to create a similar hole in Shum Hills after observing Russia's action. Darren, on the other hand, dismisses this idea as nonsensical, leading to a heated discussion about science and religion. Sean persists in trying to convince him that a natural disaster may not be the true cause of the destruction of Shum Hills, and that there is more to the story that remains unknown. Darren continues, reluctant to consider his friend's alternative perspective. He stands up to leave, feeling irritated. He can't accept the fact that his friend, despite being on a scientific team, is such a mythical and faith-driven person. Meanwhile, on the other side of the woods, 3 individuals arrive. A girl named Shelby and her 2 companions. Their mission is to fix a damaged section of the fence that an animal broke. At first, they are a little worried and wonder if it could be a human. However, one of the men in the group bends down and inspects the wire cautiously. After inspecting for a while, he concludes that it is not cut, but rather pulled, and they ponder if it could be the work of an animal. They all seem terrified and nervous, as if some creature could leap from the shadows. One of them, named C, grabs a flashlight and goes around the area to inspect. C is trembling as he searches. Suddenly, he gets a call and mentions that he will reach out if he has any leads. After hanging up, he continues looking around and comes across the broken fence that fell over a sinkhole. The fence has a small hole. He approaches and hears a strange noise. Curious, he lowers his ear to the hole and tries to hear the sounds more clearly. The man is attacked by some strange creature that crawls out of the hole and kills him. Back at the camp, we see James curiously grabbing a knife. Ariane watches him and suddenly becomes aggressive. It turns out it is a very precious knife to her. She takes it from his hands and securely places it back in her backpack. Meanwhile, Terry approaches Darren, and they share a moment of closeness. Darren talks about how one of his colleagues suggested Ariane for the trip. Back at the fence, While they work on the wire, Shutman arrives to observe the situation. He asks about Ariane and her group. It seems they are still unaware that they are trespassing in the area. The group tells Shutman that they frightened them, so they probably would have already left. Shutman, on the other hand, remains cautious. He orders them, exclaiming that he wants them to leave the area and not return, and then walks away. The next day, Ariane and her team continue their journey. As they move through the woods, they find strange, soundproofing foam usually used in film studios. Darren wonders what kind of sounds they were trying to muffle with this foam in this vast forest. Advancing, they come across the enormous sinkhole of Shum Hills. Before they can investigate further, the same car that followed them the day before arrives. They all immediately hide. After making sure no one is following them, they leave the hole behind and continue moving. Finally, after some time walking, they emerge in a small abandoned place. The rust shows it has been empty for a long time. Excitedly, with adrenaline flowing, the group rushes in. They see a house that looks like a store or something like that and enter. The place is strangely filled with fog inside. As they observe everything around, they also document with their cameras. Ariane sees a door inside the store and opens it. On the other side, they find the very mine they came to search for, the infamous Shum Hills, covered in sinkholes. The area is filled with smoke emanating from those strange holes surrounded by fences. They approach the largest one and see that several electric fences surround it. They decide to remove the fences and place a scanner and camera inside the sinkhole. While Terry examines, suddenly he hears a loud noise through his headphones. Scared, he quickly removes them, allowing everyone to hear the mysterious sound. Everyone listens intently to the booming noises of animals, wondering what could be making them. In the process, poor Terry's leg accidentally gets tangled in the camera's rope. Suddenly, someone or something pulls him into the sinkhole. They all rush to the hole, but in vain. Before they can help, a bloodied Terry is dragged into the darkest corner, his echoes of crying for help. Worried, Ariane and James descend into the hole to rescue their missing companion. They hear animalistic growls coming from all sides. Despite an extensive search, they cannot locate him. Back on the surface, a strange man arrives and is clearly upset to see one of the mine's holes open. He draws a gun and issues a stern warning for them to stay away from the hole. Darren and Sean try to convince him, explaining that their team members are trapped inside, but the man remains adamant. He goes so far as to cut one of the ropes in his attempts to seal the sinkhole. In desperation, Sean hits him with a rock, knocking him unconscious. Down in the hole, Ariane, realizing the rope has been cut, becomes anxious and decides to climb up with James to assess the situation above the ground. As they exit the sinkhole, they see the stranger and quickly leave the area, taking the stranger's car and leaving him behind. Sean is furious and blames Darren, insisting that this whole situation is a result of Darren's fanatical search for strange expeditions. A heated argument ensues, and Sean questions the identity of the company financing this nonsensical adventure. Before he can answer, the car gets stuck in a ditch. Ariane suggests they continue on foot, emphasizing the urgency of reaching the fence before night falls. Back in the mine yard, the stranger regains consciousness and sees that it is almost night. He gets up and realizes the car is gone. The man quickly calls back to his station and informs his team of the situation. Shortly thereafter, a strange creature attacks the poor man and drags him away. On the other side, the group cautiously proceeds. Suddenly, a terrifying scream from a creature pierces the darkness. Terrified, they decide to turn off their flashlights and use night vision for fear of being detected as they slowly advance. Out of nowhere, the creature launches an attack, quickly capturing Sean, while Ariane, Darren, and James manage to escape, and their luck increases when they come across a truck offering a ride in the eerie darkness. Unfortunately, Sean didn't make it out. The truck arrives at Shutman's base with the remaining 3 survivors. They follow the man to a room and a woman orders them to sit quietly there. Ariane observes the place and sees papers with strange photos of creatures pinned to the wall. There is also a picture of Derek Shutman's son. Moments later, Shutman arrives in the room. Shelby tells him about Con and Dale, the person whose car the group stole. Upon hearing his name, Darren remembers that he was one of the founders of the mining company, indicating his deep connection to Shum Hills. When questioned by the old man, he responds that all of this was in the past, and now he is just a person guarding the area. When Darren asks the old man, he replies that he protects people like him. Ariane, intrigued by the mysteries surrounding Shum Hills, seeks clarification from Shutman. Shutman acknowledges that the perceptions of the place vary widely among different people. Some see it as a sinister hole, while others consider it a purgatory. Before the explanation can continue, Shelby receives a message on the radio, and they hear that the monsters have spread across the area. Shelby, anxious to find the opened sinkhole mentioned by Ariane, aggressively seeks information about its location from Darren. Shutman tells them to go quickly and seal the sinkhole before it's too late. Everyone leaves the room except Shutman. As they depart, Shelby's companion communicates over the radio, warning that the creatures are present around and they must avoid advancing any further. In a brave act, Elroy sacrifices himself to divert the creatures' attention, allowing the group to hide in a house. Inside the house, Shelby provides valuable information about the creatures. She explains that these creatures are attracted to noise and have strange tentacles that can paralyze people upon touch. So whatever happens, they should never let these creatures capture them. As she speaks, the creatures launch an attack, forcing the group to flee into the underground tunnel of the adjacent room as a form of escape. In the middle of the tunnel, Shelby decides to separate from the group to serve as a distraction for the creatures. Ariane, Darren, and James continue on, but it's not long before they encounter the threatening creatures again. In a desperate attempt to defend themselves, James tries to use a grenade, but one of the creatures intercepts it and throws the grenade back at him. The explosion leaves the poor man wounded and paralyzed, and the creature takes him away. Now, only Ariane and Darren remain, the last survivors. Overwhelmed by the loss of their companions, Darren falls to the ground, tormented by guilt, and confesses to Ariane that a private company gained control of the Shum Hills mine, and they were drawn by the promise of substantial reward. Essentially, he came here in search of money, both because he is the proud warrior of science. Despite the grim situation, Ariane continues alone, but not before promising Darren that she will come back to rescue him. The scene shifts to Shutman, who is near the fence with his team on the opposite side, prepared to face the group of beasts trying to cross it. As the fence collapses, Shutman orders his team to open fire on the creatures. Meanwhile, we see fearful Ariane, who is still moving, desperately trying to flee from the creatures. She exits the tunnel and hides upon hearing their ominous sounds, but eventually cautiously emerges, thinking they have left. Suddenly, the creature ambushes her, taking her as a prisoner. Sometime later, Ariane regains consciousness in a strange boat, not understanding what is happening and what is in front of her. She is in the boat steered by the creature and accompanied by the lifeless body of Shelby. The creature's appearance is terrifying, and it guides the boat to its destination. Upon seeing her, the monster strikes her and leaves her unconscious again. A few hours later, she regains her senses and reunites with Darren and Sean. She looks fearfully at the monstrous creature that is undoubtedly the queen, and wonders what kind of thing that could be. Sean somehow has an answer to that question. He explains that these rare creatures reproduce and colonize similarly to ants. While providing this information, another creature arrives and captures him, dragging him to its queen. Without much ceremony, the queen creature devours Sean. Subsequently, Ariane is brought before the queen, but before the queen can harm her, Ariane manages to place a grenade in its mouth. Taking advantage of the opportunity, she escapes with Darren. As for the queen, she collapses. They eventually reach the sinkhole, which they had previously breached. Using the rope, they begin to climb out. However, a swarm of creatures gathers, and one of them climbs up the rope, threatening to attack. In an act of self-preservation, Darren cuts the rope to save Ariane. As the creatures devour the poor man below, Ariane slowly drags herself up. As she approaches the opening, the previously mentioned store owner arrives, and despite her pleas, he is about to cut the rope. Just in time, Shutman arrives and shoves him away, pulling Ariane to safety. Several creatures emerge from the sinkhole, but they are quickly overcome. Shutman's team burns them to ashes, and the hole is subsequently sealed. The next morning, Shutman drives Ariane to her vehicle and confides in the young woman that the creatures took his son. He explains that he has been battling the creatures ever since for revenge. Ariane suggests they should inform the world about these creatures, but Shutman, with a heavy heart, states that the world is not prepared to face the reality. Moreover, no one would be willing to believe them. He then extends an offer to Ariane, proposing that she stay and join him in the fight against the creatures. At first, she hesitates and gets out of the car, but after a moment of contemplation, she changes her mind and re-enters the vehicle. The film ends with Ariane accepting Shutman's offer, choosing to stay by his side in their shared struggle for survival.